Hey, it's Jordan with the Young Turks, TYT Politics, still here in St. Louis. Last night we were covering ongoing protests. It's now been a month since former officer Jason Stockley was acquitted, found not guilty for another murder, this time in 2011, of an unarmed black man named Anthony Lamar Smith. Ty and I have been covering protests now. This is our second week here, and I'm here with one of the protesters you've been pretty much at. Most of the ones I've been at, you were also in my jail cell, so big ups there. Tory. And we're actually at the Wesley House, which is a community center here, North St. Louis, and they have once a month kind of like a breakfast for the children and parents and everything. So that's where we're speaking. But I wanted to talk to you. You know, not just what's going on now, but a lot of the history here, and oppression, violence, brutality, poverty, the whole nine. First, let me ask you, now that we're kind of at 30 days since the acquittal, what do you think in terms of the progress you guys have been making? Obviously, the state's paying attention, and I think the national media is starting slowly but surely. Yeah.
I mean, we set out to do what we wanted to do. Ferguson, it really started off quickly to go national. And so local infrastructure, local capacity wasn't built. So this time we wanted to be strategic and build up local organizers and protesters and activists. And I think 30 days in, we're seeing the impact. So the governor's speaking out, he's angry. The city's lost somewhere around $15 million and almost $3 million in unnecessary overtime. We have a lot of misconduct. And incidents reports being reported by protesters and civilians. And so the dialogue around that the police is not a sufficient public safety enforcement association is the beginning of it. And so now we're looking 30 days towards, 45 days to the end of the year to really get more strategic, hit harder, and really make some real noise now.
And
Let's step outside.
okay. You know what's interesting to me? Like last night, you had protesters in the street in front of the Ferguson PD, and every time the police come out, you know, they were reading, oh, we understand your First Amendment right, but here's the ordinance you're breaking. You don't actually see the police ever approaching protesters to actually ask, why are you here? Try to open up dialogue. At least I haven't seen it in any of the times I've covered it.
Well, I mean, they're not really here to bring dialogue. They're here to enforce unjust policies, legislation, and laws. And so Ferguson is really up against a wall because of the consent decree. And so they're probably getting the worst spanking here, even though St. Louis County and St. Louis City has probably been the more egregious police departments. And so reading from the textbook, it's just like reading from the Constitution right now for black people. And so we're not concerned with what you're reading, the theory of the law. We want to see the application of these laws, and we do have the right to peacefully assemble.
And I wanted to ask you, because a lot of people, whether it be Ferguson, you see the images, you see police barreling in with shields, and last night I saw a cop knee a young white girl in the back as they were arresting her, obviously trying to hurt her. But other than those scenes, the day-to-day type of quiet brutality, can you kind of talk about it? Because I've heard everything from people going to jail for unpaid speeding tickets for 2 years in the workhouse, obviously pulled over while black, these kinds of things. Talk about, before these protests, what was the common day, week for someone like you?
I mean, so for black people, we know we don't drive in the county. So I've never really driven through Ferguson and Florissant and those municipalities, St. Anne. I don't drive through there. Everyone knows once you go up Natural Bridge or West Florissant, some of these prominent streets, you do 5 below the speed limit. When you drive, we have a kind of like something that you train to do. So you drive down the street, you slow down, you get comfortable, and you take your hat off because they think that if you got a hat, you might look black in the car. And so we do everything to not look black while we driving, and most really just stay out the hell out of the county, because we know once you go there, like when we were arrested, they were holding me on $25,000 bond for a 12-year-old parking driving ticket. So I mean, this is what they do in St. Louis.
And also, like I said, be careful about jailing journalists, because you see things things. We were in the jail cell. You have diabetes, is that correct?
Yeah, type 2 diabetes.
So you were dealing with low sugar, things like that. So people in the jail cell were banging on them to come check on you. I saw them standing in that, they opened the door and then looked at you for like 2.5 minutes as you're on the floor. I mean, for all they know, you're in diabetic shock.
Yeah, I mean, they don't really care. I mean, I think that's the apparatus of the state. I mean, once they get a uniform, they become different people. Even though we know that the correctional facility and the officers get paid the lowest, really, out of all the public safety officers in the city of St. Louis. These black people are the same black people, and because it's not just white people, they live right here in this community. And so it's something that happens to people when they put on a badge, when they don't have any accountability or transparency. And we saw it. Man, I was hurting, but you know.
And the other night there was a town hall with the mayor. It seems like you hear this in New York, you hear this in Baltimore, whether it's white politicians or black politicians, it seems to think the magic pill is like, well, we're going to hire more black officers and better training and this and that, when there's really no talk about, all right, well, you have a lot of just systemically racist police officers.
Yeah, I mean, they don't want to talk about that. So they don't want to talk that St. Louis has 2 police unions, and because the 1970s and 1980s had a lot of racial incidents actually between officers, to the fact that the black police union had to create their own because they weren't getting properly represented. Promotions, not only in the police department, but historically everyone knows that the fire department is probably the most racist institution in St. Louis and in the country. So you can go to like, I think it's Firehouse 7 everywhere. You're going to have an Italian kind of set. And so you have these places where black people just know they're not going to become fire department chiefs or captains or anything. And so they don't want to talk about that, nor do they want to talk about how they enforce housing, or how some of these corner stores sell up and sell drugs out of here, and they're not black corner stores. And so they allow this for other communities, other race and nationalities, but for poor black working class people, all they have is a hammer and we just nails.
Mm-hmm. And it's also, there's a domino effect, because if they're arresting black people on speeding tickets or unpaid parking or failure to appear, which a lot of times you can't appear because you don't have a car, whatever it is.
They don't have enough money, and so St. Louis, like Maryland Heights, they're egregious for, if you don't have the exact amount, you could be $5 short. They say you either have it all or you going to jail. So that makes people choose to run or not come to court, or try to plead for their lives. And so what happened is, you go with, you got a $125 bond, you only got $100, they don't accept the $120. They don't accept the $100. Then you send to jail. Then they sit in jail for like weeks. Kiana, she was a Ferguson protester. She became homeless for sitting in multiple municipalities for over 30 days for driving blinker out, no seatbelt. So they passed her around. So she became homeless with her children. So St. Louis is a place that's really had unchecked racism since I wouldn't say Reconstruction era, because we never had one. So since slavery stopped, racism continued.
But it seems to me, I mean, I don't want to be dramatic. It seems like it is modern day slavery, because when we were in the jail, they have the workhouse section, and you're basically putting people in jail because they can't appear in court, or they unpaid speeding ticket, whatever it is, and then some of them are there for years, making $2 a day to pay off their bond.
Yeah, man. So it's really crazy, because I regularly go into the workhouse in what we call the Justo, or the Justice Center. We go there weekly, Mondays and Fridays, and we hear it. So over 90% of the people that's in the workhouse they're just waiting. They're in limbo. They're in purgatory. So they're waiting for court. So most of those people have less than $5,000 bonds inside the workhouse. A workhouse was originally created so people could work off their debt to society and be housed at the same time. We don't have that. So the Justice Center is what they call the big bond. So people that's sitting on $10,000 or more. And so what you have is people, no court date, little to no access to a lawyer, and really no access to money, because there's no jobs on the outside. It's damn sure not going to be jobs on the inside.
And also, if you have all these things on your record for, frankly, nonsense, it kind of circulates the poverty even more. Because how are you supposed to get a well-paying job if you have several, jail stints on your record?
Yeah, I mean, jobs here is really crazy. So we talk about, the rest of the country talk about banning the box. And so in the city of St. Louis, The box is banned, so they can't ask if you are a felon or not. But what they ask is, do you have transportation or a license? And so we know that our police are predatory to take away your license for small infractions. Then if I have to show up for work with a car, then I don't have a job. And so it's their barrier, their new kind of way to make sure that you stay on foot and you stay poor and stay in poverty.
Let's talk about it seems like this is a very like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours in terms of the powerful. I'm hearing about kickbacks between the police unions, the developers, the politicians. Can you kind of talk about how the oligarchy here seems to be?
Let's move over here. Just in the shade.
So yeah, man. I mean, if we look at a number of, yeah, you could. If we're looking at any development or contracts around development, you will see the same name. And so it's some white guy named, I don't want to throw his name out there. I'm not going to do that. Mm-hmm. Anybody that can research it, you can see that over 50% of the contracts go to one person. And it's been that way since Slade's been the mayor. And so if you look at how police departments come around, even to build the new headquarters, they're giving it to their same people. If you walk into the police department, the new headquarters, you see a Veil Foundation, which is named after the Veil Prophet, which is like a local kind of regional KKK leader. And so we're seeing that the people who start this foundation, also on the police association, also part of the fire department, also are some of the biggest lobbyists, and also are family members of the elected officials, going back to Slade, to Vaccaro, to Shamer.
And also this Veil, what's it called?
Veil Foundation of Veil Prophet.
They have a gala every year.
Yeah.
Again, in the origins of the KKK that the politicians all attend.
Yeah, so every mayor, probably since the city has started, has went. And so we, in the tradition of Percy Green and Mama Jamala Rogers and Norman Say, who were civil rights activists 50 years ago, 40 years ago, we sent white people in to take photos. What did we see? We saw the mayor, the former mayor, Mayor Slay, sitting on the throne. We also saw the police chief, Sam Dotson, who just recently had to resign when Mayor Krewson came in, sitting with the Veil Prophet. And if you see it, you can Google it. It's someone in a big hat looking like a grand wizard. And we have people walking down in a gala, coming down the runway, saying that this is not about racism. This is not about a power, white supremacy kind of parade of some sort.
What's it about then, according to them? History?
Having fun. Yeah, and yeah. So I mean, if they say it's history, then we know the history of St. Louis goes back to the VP Fair. This is the Veil Prophet Fair. It goes back to the Fair of St. Louis in 1904. So for 100 years, we had a VP Fair or Veil Prophet Fair that they created a foundation to fund these things. And so when white people talk about history, it sounds like oppression, sounds like racism, sounds like slavery to me.